gosh. I love how the song picks up in tempo in the last section. You guys like that? It's like we're going like and then we're like good to see you. Hello, everybody. I have a belly full of pizza, says Ray. So she's ready. She's ready to go. We're going to go deep today, guys. We go deep every time, don't we? Good to see you all. Welcome back to Katie Church. As Rhonda said, the only church she actually looks forward to. I really understand. Church was a little slow for some of us and a little rulesy. A little, you're bad if you do this stuff and you're good if you do this stuff. And some of us are not into all of the rules, except for Squeezel the dog, who operates by the rule of love. Love and licking. Those are her credos. All right. So I wanted to pick a nice, lighthearted topic like solving all the world's problems. I am of the point of view. So we have this fucking fantastic thing going on in Ukraine. Have you noticed? And we have crazy shit going on in the world all the goddamn time. And regularly when I'm leading my Squeezel's face in the frame, look at it. Doesn't it just make the frame so much cuter? If I just point her at me, she licks. Come on. That's love. And it points us back to love really is the thing we need all the time. Now, what are the two main problems? Thank you, Ray. I'm appreciating my own makeup as well. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. What are the two things we need? I wrote in the title of this today, I wrote the two problems underneath every problem in the world. And let's just get to it. The real bottom line is we do have two. We have judgment as a problem and the fact that human beings go to and believe in their defenses above all else, which is another way of saying ego. So judgment and ego are the two problems that we have that when you look at every single problem on the planet, you find underneath it or behind it or that which is motivating it to be judgment and or ego. Now, let's talk about ego just a little bit for a second so that we understand there are two ways we need to understand ego. On one dimension of ego is necessary. One needs a functioning ego to survive on this earth. You can't live in our world without an ego. But the ego is meant to be surrendered to, or you could say bowed to, the supremacy of spirit, which is to say you're supposed to use your personality and your ego to serve the light or to serve consciousness or to serve your higher awareness or to serve the principles of higher consciousness like mercy, justice, love, equality, oneness, authenticity, etc. You know, like don't murder the people who live in the country next to you just because you feel like owning more stuff. Like, don't do that, maybe, you know, basic stuff like that. Putin, all you need. I just feel like Putin needs just one trip through the 12 steps. Just send him to an AA meeting, lock him up, make him sit there, make him work through them steps, own his part and stuff, and then we don't have any problems in this world. Trump, we should just shoot him in the head. Shoot him in the head, push him off a cliff, you know, get some birds to peck out his eyes, whatever you want. It's so dark. I love it. And I'm sorry if I just lost you. Yeah, exactly, Rhonda. If I just lost you, it's okay. There are other people who can teach you spiritual shit. We can't anymore with the Putins and the Trumps. We can't. There's no more time. We can't do it. Although I'm not exactly in charge of how things go in the universe. I don't know if you've noticed, but Katie Rubin, not the boss. So annoying. So what do we do about that? What the fuck do we do about these oligarchs and these fucking oppressors and these leaders who are fucking insane and who run the planet and make terrible decisions? Well, one thing we can do is understand ourselves better and understand what the two energies are that are underneath every mother effing problem that creates people like and patterns like Putin and Trump. What creates them are judgment and ego. Now, in both of their cases, I would argue, well, let's put it like this. Ego can harden and solidify into something way worse than ego, which we could call malignant narcissism, which I know Trump suffers from, Does Putin suffer from it as well? Yes, I get a yes from consciousness. By the way, I opened the Akashic Records of Consciousness before we started today, which we will say the prayer again formally in a few minutes here so I can channel some direct whatever, whatever. But I'm already in the space. Um, Point being, when trauma is coupled with a really strong ego and nobody treats the trauma or teaches the individual about their ego, and then they learn to get married to their defenses, and then you throw some judgment on top of that, you've got malignant narcissism, and then you've got people running the planet from that space. So what we can do in our own lives is look at ourselves and where judgment and ego get us into trouble. And then we can go out and teach each other about this. We can behave differently together in our lives and hopefully spread the light of consciousness through our choices and our behavior to the people we know and talk about it. It's why I'm coming on here talking about it to you, 14 people. I could say, if I go to my negative mind, what is the point? How am I going to help Ukraine by talking to 14 people about, ego and judgment? The answer is, and like it comes to me right away, is like, this is one way I can contribute, is to teach. My vessel is all about carrying and pulling the consciousness of the collective forward through the process of teaching and creating art. And that's how I do what I do. And that's what I'm here to do. So here I am doing it. So what do I mean by judgment and ego are the two problems under everything? Well, first we have to define. So we started out by talking about, like, there is a way that ego can be healthy and is healthy. And that is when we use our ego or our personality to serve higher principles. So I'll give you an example of what that looks like. If I say, I don't know, let's say I'm the boss of a fucking, what do you call it? The word I want is, the one that's a nonprofit. Let's say I run a nonprofit and I'm using my ego. I'm going out to I'm doing press conferences and I'm doing interviews and I'm being charming and I'm being delightful and I'm being kind to people and I'm shaking hands and playing a bit of a political game in the name of my nonprofit. And maybe my nonprofit's MO is to, like, provide housing to underserved populations. That is an appropriate way to apply ego to serving the principles of the divine. You should apply your ego in that way. I apply my ego, for example, by being delightful and gorgeous or weird and edgy, or whatever words you would use to describe my personality. I use my personality to transmit these high frequency concepts and to explain consciousness to all of us. So that's me using ego to serve higher good. Maybe you're someone who, really cares about animals, like this dog right here who you can't see right now. And so you want to, I don't know, save all the cats in the world and not have them be euthanized. So you're going to go out and be like, chit-chatting with people and gathering all the cats and using your ego, the engine of your ego, to, like, take those cats to a house where they don't get killed. That is you using the vehicle of your ego to serve higher consciousness. Okay. Now, when you use ego, however, to serve judgment, or when you use ego to serve your trauma and the beliefs created by your trauma, that's when you start serving what we call, in sort of the Sufi lineage, the darkness, or the energies that would destroy conscious awareness. So, for example, let's say I'm traumatized. I go through some sexual abuse as a kid, maybe, and then I'm afraid of men. So out of my fear, which is my trauma of men, I form a belief or a judgment about men. Men are scary. Men are bad. That's a judgment of men based in a trauma I experienced. Okay. Now, if I use my ego to bolster up that idea, and now every man who comes near me, I'm just defensive and pulled away from him, and I'm in judgment of him, or you could say in the Sufi lineage language, separation from every man. Now I've created separation on the planet, and I'm using the ego to serve not spiritual principles. I'm using the ego to serve my trauma, my injury, my pain, my suffering. That's serving the self. Now, if you go even darker and you get to a place where you have so much trauma and or so much fear that you want to harm other people, right? Let's say you're a sociopath or a psychopath and you want to actually inflict pain on other people. Now you're using your ego to harm others. That's actually using ego to serve the darkness. Okay. The darkness being, again, the forces that would work to shut off or shut down or kill or snuff out the light. So those are the three ways you can use ego. You can use it to serve the self, you can use it to serve the light, or you can use it to serve the darkness. Now, why do I say, so that's ego. Now, why do I say that judgment is one of the other two fundamental problems underneath everything? When we decide that we are right or wrong about our points of view, we get real rigid and real closed down, and we revert usually to our egoic behaviors when we are coming from judgment. So an example would be my judgment of Trump. Let's use it. Let's look at it. I just said a minute ago, let's push him off a cliff. I openly dislike this man. I openly think he's a toxic fucking cancer on the face of America and the world. Now, how do we frame this? Let's put it like this. So if someone were to, me energetically spending a lot of time in judgment of Trump would make me start to get sick. I have this thing now with my spiritual connection where the more minutes in my day I sit around going like, what an asshole, and he's so wrong and I'm so right, I start to get sick, like literally sick. For the rest of us, for the majority of humanity, you might not feel sick immediately, but it starts to chip away at the spirit of your soul and the light on your heart when you sit in judgment of other people. Now, that doesn't mean what Trump is doing is right or what he has done is right or good. It just means that the more energy I put into judging him, the more I suffer and the more separation I create. What I could instead do is put my energy toward speaking up for or standing up for the principles of justice and mercy and oneness and authenticity and love and communion that I believe in the face of Trump's behavior. So if I become more inclusive, if I become more awake and aware and loving of my neighbors and generous in the face of someone who is behaving in ways that I think are not that would be, again, me applying my ego in the service to the principles of the divine, as opposed to spending my energy judging that motherfucker. Now, I am angry with him because he did fucked up shit to people, and that's just clear and simple. But there is a difference, check this out, between anger and judgment. Judgment takes us from anger to hatred and resentment. Let me say that again. Judgment, when I go right, wrong, good, bad, takes me from being angry at Trump to hating Trump and then to resenting Trump. Now, what's the problem with resentment, you ask? Resentment is hatred hardened over the heart. Resentment is where I am so right and Trump is so wrong that I now have a hard layer formed over my heart that Trump can never penetrate. And when I have a layer that hard over my heart, that gives, I start to get sick and heavy and unfun to be around and not light. And I start to break my spiritual connection to my God or my source or my conscious alignment. That's what it does, by the way. Resentment breaks your connection to source, which then stops your healing. So I resent Trump and I stop healing. I resent Trump. I can't know God in every corner of my heart, not in that corner where I resent him, because resentment is like an energetic wall that separates us from the divine. That's how it works. That's why it works. So do I have to feel like puppies and kittens and rainbows about Trump? I do not. I can be angry with his choices without letting it harden into hatred or resentment, and without going to total judgment of him. Believe it or not, even Trump and Putin came from some kind of situation that made them who they are. Yes, they had choice along the way. And yes, they can make better fucking choices. And yes, they fucking should fucking make fucking better fucking choices. Fuck. But they came from somewhere that created the circumstances that made them be what they are, Who even knows what's in their charts? If we looked at the chart of Putin or Trump, we might find some interesting, weird shit. Okay. Consciousness does interesting, weird things to move itself forward in time space. So they are occurring. The Trumps and Putins of the world, they are occurring. And resenting them doesn't make them not exist. And it doesn't make them not occur. It just makes you feel righteous or right. And the righter you feel about stuff like this, again, the harder your heart gets, and the more disconnected you get from source, from the light of the divine. So the question is, do you want that hardness on your heart? And I would even say, do you want to become Trump? Do you want to become Putin? I imagine not. And because if you don't want to become Trump and Putin, you need to not behave the way they behave. And the way those men behave is they are so covered in resentment and or fear and or judgment that they have separated themselves from the rest of humanity, and certainly from their connection to the divine, such that they can behave the way they behave. You have to be very separate from the divine and your care of humanity to behave the way they behave. So do we want to become them? No. So let us not behave like them. And so Jane asks, how do you love on Trump? I'm not saying you need to love on Trump. I'm saying you can feel angry about his choices, but when you take that to resentment or hatred, now you are getting yourself as sick as he is. And is that what you want? Again, it's not about puppies and kittens and rainbows about these freaking megalomaniacal crazy people. We don't need to be like good vibes only about fucking Trump and Putin. That is not the idea. The idea is to have your emotional truth, to know what your principles are. Maybe mercy, justice, freedom, unity, oneness, and love are some good principles to follow. Those are sort of the spiritual principles at the heart of Sufism, which is just one mystical path to know the divine. There are many mystical paths to know the divine, all of which, by the way, teach mercy, love, freedom, communion, oneness, and justice and authenticity. That's fucking what spirituality teaches when you look at the heart of it from any of the traditions. Peace, mercy, justice, freedom, and love. If you function from those energies and you use your ego to serve those guys, you won't have any problems. Now, where we go inside of ourselves that takes us away from those energies, that's when we start to suffer. Okay. So, okay, here's some good questions. Okay. Thank you, Sonia. I will preach. I'm a preach. I'm preaching. How do you walk away in love to keep your heart soft for yourself when the other person's heart seems hard? Yeah, that's a really great question. Okay, let me drop into, in a more formal way, the records of consciousness to channel this a little more directly. So can we all take a couple deep breaths in the low belly? We're just going to anchor ourselves as a collective here right now. So we just fill the low belly with air. Just drop your energetic awareness into your womb space, pelvic floor. And then feel into the bottoms of your feet and feel them in connection with the earth. And then see in your mind's eye a little spinning foot chakra spinning open at the bottom of each foot, like a little vortex or a little tornado of light, spinning wide and spinning open at the bottom of each of your feet until the entire surface area of the bottom of each foot is an open window of light, connecting the electromagnetic field of your body to the electromagnetic field of the earth. Amen. Imagine, see, visualize now 500 energetic tree roots of light shooting from the tree of light of the consciousness of you down through the open window of each of your feet. So we're sending 1,000 tree roots of light down into the earth, anchoring hundreds of miles into the earth below our feet. Great job. Next, we're going to watch a big, wide grounding cord shoot from the base of the spine to the center of the earth. The moment it hits the center of the earth, we watch as a river of light is given by Sophia Gaia, just through our intention and desire to receive it. A river of golden or white light flows up through your grounding cord into the base of your spine. It floods forward into your hip sockets, quads, glutes, hamstrings, down through the knees, calves, shins, ankles, and feet, down into the roots we established moments ago. See this river of light activating, nourishing, grounding your root chakra, your legs, and all the roots that extend through the open window of each of your feet. Good, everybody. And so we do acknowledge the forces of light, asking for guidance, direction, and courage to know the truth as it is revealed for our highest good and the highest good of everyone connected to us. Holy Spirit of God, protect me, please, from all forms of self-centeredness and direct my attention to the work at hand. Help me to know consciousness in the light of the Akashic records. Help me to see consciousness through the eyes of the lords of the records and enable me to share the wisdom, please, and the compassion that the masters, teachers, and loved ones of consciousness have for consciousness. All right. Thank you, guys. And as I anchor into the alignment, it's like what I'm doing here now, this is important to understand, is I'm anchoring through the spiritual energy, the vortex of spiritual light, into conscious awareness. So I'm not bypassing spirit to get to consciousness. I'm going through the portal of spirit. So it's almost like I'm looking through the lens of spirituality at the field of the all that is. That's just what I get that I'm meant to be doing lately. So here I am doing it. All right. So Cindy's question was, how do you walk away in love to keep your heart soft for yourself and when the other person's heart seems hard? Here's the bottom line. There's two things here. We have to do our own work on our own. When your heart gets hard because you're in an argument with someone and your defenses go up, you have to go away, do your own work to get to soft-heartedness again so that you can connect with them and receive from them. If their heart is still hard, though, and they're not going to let you in, you've got to wait until their heart is soft. Now, if you discover that this person you're trying to have a soft heart with is never soft-hearted, you might want to reconsider why you're trying to have a soft-hearted interaction with a hard-hearted person. That's on you. That's a boundary issue you have. In other words, don't hang out with people who aren't willing to soften their heart to your soft heart. Everybody needs a minute to process. Okay, we are humans with egos and minds, and we get in our own way all day, every goddamn day. But the goal is have some kind of spiritual process that you go through that gets you back to the softness of your own heart so that when you're interacting with those in your life, you're available with an open heart to theirs. They then have to do the same. They have to go away and do their heart work and get open-hearted so that they can connect with you from your heart. But that implies and suggests that that person has to know themselves well enough and have some tools for healing and consciousness and awareness that they can do that. That's why, you guys, it's really important who you date and who you marry. It's very, very important who we choose to have our most intimate relationships with. It's got to be people who could do the work of knowing themselves to the degree that you're doing. If you're working as hard as y'all are working, if you're here on a Wednesday night at 5:30 in the goddamn afternoon on the East Coast, and whatever that is on the 2:30 in the middle of the day on the West Coast, and some weird time in the middle of night in Europe, if you're fucking here now doing this, listen to my ass, you are a person who works hard on yourself. So you better believe you need to choose very carefully who you spend your fucking time with. And they better be somebody who works equally as hard or who already is like real healthy and loving. And you're the one who's working hard at getting healthy and loving, because that's all that's left for you. Highbrow motherfuckers. Okay, I hope that helps. If you have further questions on that, Cindy, feel free to post. Please throw your questions in the chat if anybody has any more. How do we best, says Doc Bill, how do we best assist others, the world, not to follow them? Okay, I assume we're talking about the oligarchs and the crazy leaders of the... Okay. Human beings tend to take advice from people they admire. They tend to take direction from people they respect, and they tend to take direction from and suggestions from people who, quote unquote, have what they want. So if I see you on the street and you vibe to me as the kind of person I want to be, I can feel from you that you've got a soft heart and a sharp mind, and you give a shit about the things I give a shit about, and you care about humanity and oneness and kindness and compassion and also clarity of speech. And I can feel that on you. I'm going to listen to you. So it comes back to when you're asking the questions, Doc Bill, how do we assist others, the world, not to follow those people. It's about who are you being? And are you being someone that people want to follow? And if you're not, what do you need to do to clean up your own house to get yourself to be someone that people want to follow and people want to listen to? I'll tell you what they don't want to listen to is, you guys are wrong and idiots and I'm right and you should listen to me because I'm right and you're wrong. That brings us back to our topic of the day, which is judgment. It doesn't work to judge people into changing. It doesn't fucking work. Every now and again, it kind of does work. I'll be honest with you guys. Like, I don't know, in 1 out of 100 cases or something, because some people are so steeped in judgment that they believe in the value of judgment. And they're like, you're right. I am wrong. I am dumb. And you are smart. And I'll be smart like you because my ego wants to prove to the world how smart I am. So I'll now flip my opinion and match your opinion because you're clearly the smart one and I want to be smart. That's an egoic way to get through to people. So some people are functioning that way, and you have to kind of feel them out and read the room and see, is this a person who's going to like hop on board with me if I make a good argument, which is to say, like, if somebody comes around to your point of view through bullying, that tells you something about that person. Most people, however, don't come around to new ways of thinking from bullying. They come around to new ways of thinking through going through an experience that makes them feel different. People, that's why storytelling is such a powerful tool for healing and transformation. When you tell a story about something that happened to a person or to an animal or to an aardvark or to an airplane, if you tell a good enough narrative, you've got everybody in the room in the palm of your hands. Stories are very, very powerful because they're very relatable. It's some kind of being on a human journey having an experience that changes them emotionally. So stories touch people emotionally and cause them to change their point of view based on having the emotional experience that the story took them through. Another way to do it is to speak truthfully about your own personal experience using I statements rather than coming at the other person and going, you should do this and you shouldn't follow Trump and you shouldn't follow Putin. Instead, you go, I discovered this, this, and this about how these guys are operating. And I feel like this because I serve the principles of justice and mercy. And it's your choice what you serve, you say to them. It's your choice. It's everybody's choice. We really don't have the power to change people's minds. If really, we have the power to show them what works for us and what we believe in. And we have the power to show them what's possible, but they're always going to have to choose. So when you validate somebody else's ability to choose, it makes them feel empowered and not judged by you. People resist the wisdom you have to teach them when they feel judged by you. And there we go back again to tonight's topic of judgment. People do not respond well to feeling judged, period. So if you want to influence people, you can't judge them. You've got to, let me phrase that differently. If you want to influence people who are different than you and have a different point of view than you, you can't come from judgment. And this is why it's really hard. It's a really, really difficult thing. I hope that makes some sense, Doc Bill. This brings up, says Jane, the authenticity stopper you mentioned in the podcast. The authenticity stopper. Folks are uncomfortable when one is in their authenticity enthusiasm. How do we navigate that, do our work, and still assist, as Doc Bill asked? Okay, this is about, Jane, appropriate formats for enthusiasm, and it's about reading the room. So when I do stand-up comedy or do the podcast or come on here or make a video on social media, there is space for my enthusiasm. When I stand on stage, people are open to enthusiasm. But when I'm in a chit chat with someone who's real triggered about having a different point of view than I have, my enthusiasm can bowl them over. And it can shut them down. So as much as I want to be enthusiastic in every situation, because I do feel like a golden retriever puppy, y'all have heard me talk about this. I'm very much like, just like a big, loud, happy lady who wants to be like, we're all friends. But unfortunately, or you could say fortunately, That doesn't always work for everybody. Now, in my personal life, I've come to a place where I'm like, cool, if people like a big golden retriever, loud puppy lady, then they're going to like me. And those are my friends. But people who don't like that are not my friends. And that's okay. No harm, no foul. That's okay. But if we're looking at talking about the topic of influencing other people, I've got to read the room about what can the room receive right now. You said, how do we navigate that, do our work, and still assist? Folks are uncomfortable when one is in their authenticity, enthusiasm. You've got, okay, this is going to be a little challenging to hear, Jane, but this is what I get. Sometimes what you're calling enthusiasm and authenticity has judgment tinged into it. Judgment winds itself around your enthusiastic point of view, and there's a thin layer of it in there, and that's what they're actually reacting to. They're reacting to you being like, oh my gosh, here's a great idea, but actually you're an idiot if you don't believe me, or this is the right idea, or I don't know what it is, and I don't want to presume to tell you what your judgments are, but I would look at where inside my enthusiastic presentation is their judgment hidden from me, myself? And could that possibly be what people are repelled away from? So there's that. Is there anything else for her on that? No. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Story is all. I don't know what that means. Oh, that must have been a typo. Okay, great. All right. Other questions that folks have? We are in the records of consciousness. Now is a great time to throw questions in the chat. Please put them up. Now is the time. It can be about your personal self. It can be my pleasure, Jane. I hope it's helpful. About these concepts in general. And in a moment, I'm going to, yes, hidden judgment within yourself, Cindy. If you have a question about that, why don't you type it? I'd love to hear what it is. I pulled 3 cards for this group before y'all came on. Okay. And it's very, very interesting what it is based on where this conversation has gone. Yes, I can expand on that. I'll come back to the cards in a second. So Cindy says, hidden judgment within ourselves. Can you expand on that? Yeah. I mean, okay. It's very easy to become unaware of where we are judging others. We carry judgments all the time. We're full of judgment. We're all walking around thinking we are right and good, and some other people that we don't like or agree with are wrong and bad. And so you've got to really deeply examine when you're communicating with people, is there a subtle form in my heart somewhere where I am believing I am superior to them? And if so, you're in judgment. Is there a subtle place in my heart where I believe I am inferior to them? If so, you're in judgment, in this case of yourself. Where am I in judgment of anyone in any way, of myself or the other person in this conversation? And it takes time to get really clear about your judgments. Judgments really feel like, how do I say? Judgments come from the energy. Usually they're born of fear. Like, I'm afraid something bad's going to happen, so I'll judge this other thing as right or good so that I can avoid that bad, scary thing I've designated as bad, scary. And it may actually be bad and scary. But the point is, you can be afraid of something without judging it. You can even run away from something because it's got a bat and it's going to hit you in the face with that bat, and you still don't have to judge it. Judgment creates resentment on the heart, and resentment on the heart creates separation between you and that person. You don't have to judge an assailant to run away from them. You don't have to judge Trump to disagree with him. You don't have to judge anyone to do anything that you feel is the thing to do, that you feel is correct for you. So this is a subtle process that takes time to figure out. You have to really be honest with yourself. It takes a lot of self-awareness and a lot of self-honesty to discover, where am I going to righteousness? Where am I going to judgment? And would I be willing to back off of it and still stand for what I believe in? I hope that helps, Cindy. Let me know if you have further questions. Let's see. Doc says, I'll have held my deeper spiritual views back from audiences because they might not receive them, but I've compromised myself. Can you advise? I think I need more context to understand what you're talking about. What kind of deeper spiritual views and what kind of audience? If you can help me understand that, I could probably help. I've always felt like an adult, says 90. How do I bring out my inner child if I haven't done so? Interesting question. Let me look forward at some of the other questions we have. Is it possible that I'm carrying other people's energies with me, even if I have only briefly met them? Yes, Emily Sand Phillips. I'll come back to you, Doc and Ninety. Doc, if you could say more, and Ninety, give me a second. Yes, it's of course it's possible that you can be carrying other people's energies if you've only briefly met them, to the point where it's a specific feeling taking over my physical and emotional body for days. Yes. Um, so sometimes, Emily, that can be a reaction to them, and sometimes that's you've taken on some of their energy. It depends on the situations. Okay, so it depends on the specific situation. And if you want to ask about a specific situation, feel free. Your kind of messages from educators who only want standard stuff. I see. So, Doc, you're talking about you're someone who educates educators and they don't want to hear spiritual stuff. That's what you're saying, I think. Let me know if I'm getting that incorrect. Here's what I would say to that. And I've done this very thing and I regularly do this very thing. This is a really good question, you guys, because it's going to relate to a lot of you in a lot of different scenarios. Okay, got you, Bill. Thank you. I'll give you an example. I teach through ACT, the American Conservatory Theater, in corporate environments. I teach corporate people like communication skills and public speaking skills. It's like a holdover from my acting days and a lot of teach. I love teaching all kinds of stuff, so I end up teaching all kinds of stuff. And that's one of the things I teach through ACT and through Stanford. I go into corporate environments and teach them all kinds of shit, really about listening, being present, feeling your feelings, communication, effective communication skills, how to be authentic on stage, all that kind of stuff. And in my personal experience, because I am oriented the way I am to time and space, there's no way to talk about public speaking and intimacy and effective communications without getting a little esoteric, abstract, or spiritual. So what I do is I put my spiritual concepts in language they can handle. You have to kind of read the room, Doc. I don't know whether to call you Doc or Bill. Let me know. And you have to feel into what can this room hear. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes I'll talk with people about a vibe or a feeling instead of saying extrasensory perception. Instead of saying like, what do you perceive through the psychic antenna of your body mind organism? To a corporate group, I would say, what can you feel? What are you aware of through your body? We do a lot of breath work with these groups of people to get them connected to themselves. And I don't tell them anything. I take them through an experience. Bill, got it. I take them through an experience like an exercise, and maybe it's their eyes are closed and they're doing deep breath work. And I go, so what happened for you? And then they share what happened, and they're always saying spiritual shit. They go, wow, it was like I traveled to another dimension and I saw my mother was there and then I was crying and I didn't know what happened. And I'm like, well, we just moved some energy and did an energy healing for you, all by you just breathing and being present in the moment, corporate lady who doesn't understand what's happening. And so they will often give back to you what you want them to know if you simply take them through an exercise that gives them the experience of it. So that's one way to go, is get experiential with them and take them through an experience that makes them have their own realization about stuff, and or do what you just wrote that you already try to do, put it in language they can hear. That being said, I'll add this. Feel into the room you're in, because you never know. Some people are more ready to hear what you might be judging that they're not ready to hear. Like, I'll test the waters from time to time and say something to a group of actors or a group of corporate folks. And I'll be like, well, that's when you dissolve your sense of self into the unity and oneness of all that is. And I laugh like, look, I'm doing a joke. I'm doing a bit. And then some of them are like, looking at me like, got it. Okay, cool. The unity and oneness of all that is. So sometimes people can hear more than we think they can. And so we want to expand our own judgments, like release a little bit some of your preconceived notions about what you think they can and can't hear, and give them just a little bit more than you think they can handle, and just keep reading the room and see how it goes. And then, of course, do stuff here on an open platform where you can say whatever the fuck you want and build your audience that way, because the people who want to hear about consciousness will come here and the people who don't won't. And that's a great reason to do the free market. Okay, Emily says, specific situation. I briefly met a man who is an ex-bank robber, and a documentary was recently released about him. Wow. And I had the exact same feeling I had when meeting him when watching it. It's very specific, and I feel I get pulled into a lot of the stories around the robberies and his life. Was this me reacting to it? No, I think that was you aware of what he would, what the, aware energetically of what he's carrying in his being. So you're feeling the density and the ickiness of what he's carrying. Sorry, that's what's happening. Um, Yeah, and only you can scan yourself and ask yourself, when you say, "Was this me reacting to it?" Really, what that is you're asking, "Was I judging him?" And I actually get a real big no on that. It doesn't seem like it to me, but you tell me, were you judging him, or were you just like energetically aware of some really intense energies? Listen, I had a healer say to me once, don't watch horror films, Katie. This was at a time when I was like healing some acute trauma stuff. And I was like really blown open spiritually all the time. I tend to be pretty damn open anyway. And he was like, don't watch horror movies because it's going to take you into the imaginal realm of horror stuff. And then you're going to have terrible dreams. And then you're going to pull into your energy field a bunch of horror shit. And it's true. You can do that. Okay, this brings us to a whole different topic. But the short version of this topic is, I probably talked about this last week or a couple weeks ago. The imaginal realm, the realm of consciousness where imagination happens, is one. If you think about it like this, we live in this dense reality, this 3D reality where there's right, wrong, good, bad polarities right here. In the Sufi language, they call it the mulk realm. And then the next layer out, I'm going to radically oversimplify things just to make this point. A couple layers out, okay, is something called the imaginal realm, where imagination lives. And then past that are those subtler and subtler realms of consciousness, known as the divine realms, or you could call them the realms of higher frequencies of conscious light or conscious awareness. So you notice you have to pass through the realms of the imaginal realms to get to the realms of consciousness or the higher frequencies of light. So imagination is used to catapult us into the realms of high frequency light. So when you send your imagination into horror films or stories about robbers, and now you're spinning in that energy field, you can pull dark energy from the other realms that are just floating around out there into your space by being so focused in the imaginal realm on that dark stuff. And B, you can attune your frequency to that kind of dark stuff. So then you just feel the heaviness of it. So it's a good argument to maybe not pay so much attention to that stuff. That being said, I'm someone who likes to dip in and out of dark topics. I just read my own energy on it. It's like if I'll listen to like a true crime podcast, but if there's a certain place in a true crime podcast where it gets too dark and I'm like, no, thanks, I'm out. I don't need to go energetically to that place. I'm out. And then I'll like consciously close my energy field in that little area and then be like, and do some like spiritual chanting or open the records of consciousness and get back into my alignment and just like send that heaviness away. Because if you spend a lot of time paying attention to that stuff, you start to become that stuff. Everything you pay attention to is what you become. It's true. So yeah, I hope that's helpful, Emily. Many audiences are very religious, says Bill, but think spirituality is real. Sure. Yeah. So that's why I say you've got to test the waters and take little steps into giving them awareness of what you believe is true and what you know is true without shutting them down and sending them into their defenses. Sonia says, I've used this before in connecting the space between religion and spirituality. Oh, John 14:12. Okay, cool. So Sonia's quoting, giving you a biblical reference for how you could bridge those gaps, Bill, if you so desire it. Emily says, yes, thank you for that. It definitely felt truly heavy and not part of me. Absolutely. Tina, good to see you. Tina. I always get Tina's name incorrect because she's from Switzerland, the Netherlands. Help me remember. I feel more disconnected to the divine recently, and I'm wondering how I most effectively can clear my channel. Like, what would you suggest I do on my own to reconnect? Okay, let me sit with that for a moment. Okay. So Tina, um, that's so neat. That's so interesting. You have a kind of okay, the first piece is connect more with your emotions again, and you'll get connected to the divine. There's like a way that you've either been like too busy or too stressed out or nervous or anxious or something to spend much time with your emotional body. And remember that the emotions are the doorway or the midway point between the spirit and the body. So when you neglect your emotional reality, you neglect spirit. Spirit can't enter you if you're disconnected from your emotional body. So there's that. But there's another piece here for you that has to do with it's like you're a subtle being. You're a subtle being. You have a refined, subtle softness about you through the middle of you. And I don't know what you've been doing that's been really like harsh or busy or pushing or trying or surviving or something that has had you come out of a it's like you've come out of connection with your own midline, the low belly, the middle of your belly, the heart, the upper chest, the throat, all, but in the middle of your body. You've been pulled sort of forward by the pressures of your life. And so to get connected back to the divine, it's like they show me you're like on your bed or in a comfortable chair where your back is supported and you just let yourself drop back into the middle of yourself, feel and cry. It's almost like you've had to be really strong lately, so you haven't had room or time or energy to just be with your own midline, the center line of you. Sit with that subtlety, the subtleness of you. This you're like a delicate, subtle being in the middle of yourself. Be with her and feel what's there, and you'll find your access point to the divine again. Norway, got it. All right. Um, Rhonda says she'd love any feedback the record keepers have about her unrelenting fascination about all things Vikings. How fun is that? She feels like she's not getting a message or messages that are outside her awareness. I'm not sure what that means. So much about the origins of their ways are really barbaric and heavy. Uh-huh. So I think you're asking, why are you unrelentingly fascinated with all things Vikings? Is that right? Is that what you're asking, Rhonda? Let me sit with that. Well, okay. This sounds like such a typical sort of almost cliche. Okay, gotcha. That's the question. Woo woo lady thing to say, but I gotta say what I get, which is by the way, that's an example right there of how judgment, if you guys are energy workers or healers, Tina says you have no idea how that resonates. That helps a lot. Thank you so much. I'm so glad. It's my sincere pleasure, my love. Thank you for asking the question. And I'm really glad it resonates. Judgment. So judgment. We're talking about judgment today. Right there, my mind did a thing where it went, I'm looking at Rhonda's energy, I'm feeling into it, and I'm looking at what I'm getting. And the answer that comes is like she's got some past lives in the Viking world and like a bunch of them. And that's such a cliche spiritual lady thing to say that my mind goes, that's too cliche spiritual lady. So it's in judgment of what I get in my awareness. So instead of judging it, what I'm doing right now is I'm naming the judgment. You ever heard the phrase name it to tame it? So I'm naming it to tame it. Name it to tame it, y'all. And by naming it, I can go, okay, I'm not going to choose to engage with that judgment. So I hear you, judgment, and I'm not engaging. Now, so lifetimes as a Viking priestess, also get that you were like a badass wife, not necessarily like in charge of the clan or anything, but you were like one of those badass wives that like all the other wives would be like, what's Rhonda gonna do? We'll do what Rhonda's doing. Like the men go off on their sea voyage and it's like, I don't know, there's chaos in the village and you're like, all right, bitches, we're gonna fucking do this now. We're gonna hunt our own fish and make our own fires and we're gonna make pelts out of lion skins. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why. Um, and there's something also, Rhonda, spiritually significant about it for you. If I were you, I would look into Viking spiritual practices and Viking spirituality, which I know nothing about. I would look into it and sort of see if there are any practices left over from that tradition that resonate with you. Um, for everybody's awareness and information, sometimes, uh, sometimes, let me come back. Let me just focus here. When we become aware of a past life energy, the whole point of becoming aware of it is to clear the energy out of our system and no longer carry that energy. 9 times out of 10, that's what I get for people. And people always want to know the narrative, not always, but often want to know the narrative. What happened to me in this past life? Who was I? Who was I married to, etc. And oftentimes what I get in the records is like, it's not relevant. What's relevant is clear the energy out of your system so that that past life isn't affecting you today in your present life, right? But in this case, and as is sometimes the case, there's something important about the lineage of it for you, Rhonda, in your present day life. So that's a big yes. I would look into Viking spirituality, Viking history. I would look into your family tree and learn about it. I would let yourself really explore the culture of it as much as you possibly can. Squeezel, she's licking my hand while I say that. It's a very holy thing. When Squeezel licks your hand, deep truths are being shared. Yeah. So let your curiosity take you as far as you want to go into the Viking research and understanding it. There's like something really deep for you there, in particular about their practices. And I'm wondering if you've ever traveled over there. It might be good for you to go take a trip over there. Okay, cool. My pleasure. I'm glad that reads. Good, good, good. All right, let's see. I'm going to scroll back because we had a couple previous questions. Carly, who did I miss here? Why have I always had a fascination with death and dying? I even had a child with a life-shortening disease. Is there a connection there? Yes, there is. I am on a far more spiritual path than ever before and trying to figure out where I'm going. Got you, Carly. Let me come back to that. Rhonda says, on the list. Cool. So get on it, homie. Get over there. And yeah, Naomi wants to know about her inner child. We got a lot of questions today, guys. You got to bear with me. It takes a minute. And I'm reading the energy on where they want me to go first. So I'm answering questions in the order I get to answer them. Okay, Margaret is experiencing bronchitis. What's the lesson in it? Okay, give me a second. Grief, rage, fury, blame, anger, stored in the lungs. And this anger, Margaret, is about where you don't honor yourself in the short term, or where in the past you didn't honor yourself in the short term and then let things go on and on and on, getting your boundaries crossed and your boundaries crossed and your boundaries crossed, and then getting mad at the other person without having set the boundary in the first place or without having honored yourself back at the beginning. So it's old stuff that's clearing because of all this work you've been doing, you know, with us and also with whatever else you're doing, all the work you do with yourself. It's old stuff that's ready to move out. So it's really good. The bronchitis is like releasing this grief and this anger and this hate. The lesson going forward is boundaries, clear communication and boundaries, asking questions and setting boundaries so you get your needs met. Now, here's why they want me to look at this question right now, you guys, because we only have 3 minutes left for today. If you remember from the title of what I called today, I was talking about grief in the title. The solution to this, do you guys see that? She just slipped in behind my back. The dog is now between the seat and my back, acting like lumbar support. Let me just look at this. Hold on. Can you see that little face? You see that right there? Look at that. Come on. She's the weirdest, and I love her so much. Yes, thank you. The cards are pulled. Thank you, Elizabeth Ann. Okay, let me wrap up with this idea because it all ties together. This is perfect. Margaret, your question takes us perfectly to boom, boom, boom. Grief is underneath Every time a human being has a need to judge or go to their ego, there's always grief buried underneath that need to judge or go to the ego. So when your defenses go up, they go up because something from the past that happened is triggered, and that thing from the past did not get completely grieved. So if Putin, this is taking us all the way back to the beginning of tonight, perfectly, I'm kind of amazed. If Putin were to go to his childhood pain, all of it, each one by one by one, and the pain of his young adulthood and the pain of his childhood, I'm actually way more tapped into it than I would like to be at this moment, but it's useful. So we're going to look at it. And if he were to grieve the loss, all the losses along the way, he would have no need to come from his ego and megalomaniacally attempt to control other countries today and other people today. But of course, we know Putin will probably not do that work. I mean, who the fuck knows? Let's all say some prayers. God willing, Putin wakes up tomorrow and goes, I'm going to get conscious and face my vulnerability. That'd be nice. Then we wouldn't have some problems. Let's pray for that. Let's all pray for that tonight. Okay. So truly, truly underneath every defensive strategy that you have and that Putin has and that we all have and that I have is something ungrieved. So get busy grieving the past losses that you haven't fully grieved. And eventually your heart will, when you get all that rage and anger and grief out of there, because remember, anger and rage and fury and hate, they sit on top of grief. So when you get behind the anger, there's always grief. Be with that grief, Margaret and all of us, and let it dissolve through your spiritual practice or just through crying or however you do it, therapy, whatever you want to do. And when that grief dissolves, the part of you that was holding the grief, that speaking in therapy terms, that parts work part of you that was holding the grief can integrate and grow up and meet you at your present day age. But you may need some help doing that grief work, which is why you see a healer or why you call your therapist or why you see your coach. Okay. So that brings me to the 3-card spread. I pulled these before you guys hopped on. Okay. So the recent past, we have the Moonlight card. The present moment, and I'll tell you about this in a second, is the, let me do this, Wishing Well card. Love that card. And the outcome card is the Cleaning House card. Now, this is remarkable based on what we've been talking about tonight. I did not plan any of this. What these cards say is this. This card is all about intuition, and actually it's about oracles and cards. So it's saying in the recent past of your lives, you guys, you've had need or a call to go inward into your inner emotional sanctuary and your inner spiritual sanctuary and pull some divination cards or do some prayer work or listen to the quiet, subtle, intuitive inner truth of you. And in the present moment, we're standing at this wishing well moment where we can send, I have to backwards, we can send our wishes into the wishing well and create really cool shit. Let me read how Colette Baron Reed says it with this card. Desire is the sacred impulse for life. Feel it, but let go of all attachment to ownership. Desire is the most important impulse for creating life. Now we are seeing the relationship between desire and inspiration and sensing that moment of truth when you feel the inception of new life. It is an aha moment when everything makes sense. Perhaps you recognize a soulmate or are conceiving a baby or an idea. The Wishing Well card awakens you to the presence of unseen forces that enable new beginnings. So in the recent past, we've been with the unseen forces of prayer, meditation, oracle cards. Right now, this card shows us the presence of unseen forces that enable new beginnings. Divine intelligence activates the field of possibilities where new life is co-created in a magical way. How wonderful is that? Neither you nor anyone else can know how or why this happens. It just does. To that end, you can't control the process of growth. Rather, you must step aside to be a channel for higher forces and relinquish any attachment to how this new creation should appear or when. Form your intention and take action by dropping the coin into the wishing well. It's the image on the card here, the wishing well. Drop your coin into the wishing well and then trust in spirit. Prepare to be amazed. So we're being encouraged to, make a baby, or make a project or do a new thing, and set your intention while at the same time getting out of the way and allowing spirit to do what needs doing. Now, the outcome of this is this cleaning house card, which has everything to do with everything we've been talking about tonight. And I'll wrap up by talking about this. The cleaning house card says this. I'll read it in her words and then say some stuff about it. It's time to clear the clutter to make way for better things. When you see the cleaning house card in a reading, it's time to declutter your life. Get rid of unwanted things in your physical home and release what you no longer want or truly need. Is there any unfinished business you should address? Thoughts, memories, emotional baggage must be swept out of your house as well. Your conscience must be clear for you to move freely in the world. Celebrate a spring cleaning and feel the freedom as you make way for much better things. Look at what you've resisted discarding and be honest about its value. Be honest. Clean house. So when you try to make something, you guys, when you drop the penny of intention into the wishing well of consciousness, the result is like you're going to need to make room by cleaning house, whether it's emotionally cleaning house or energetically cleaning house or physically cleaning your house or getting those closets cleared out. Or for me, it's like the trunk of my car. I always notice that whenever I clear out the trunk of my car, there's always some emotional release that comes with it. There's always like something cluttered inside of me that is reflected by my trunk being full of shit. And when I clear the trunk, it opens something in my energetic space that allows whatever was in here in the trunk of me to move through my being. So you've been going internal recently. You've been pulling the cards or getting spiritual. You've got some strong intentions and it's a good time to make a baby or a project or start a thing. Set those intentions, be clear about them, and then be ready to clean house. Get rid of what you don't actually need. And this is, see, when I think cleaning house, I think about exactly what we've been talking about tonight. Where are you holding resentment? Where are you holding anger in a way that if you were to clean house by grieving would allow you to release that resentment and anger? The most important house we all need to be clearing regularly is this house, the spiritual temple, the body-mind organism. The body, mind, heart, gut organism has to be clean. How do you clean it? You feel your feelings, you process them, you release them, and you allow spirit to move through you, and you act with integrity, authenticity, clarity, and truth. That's how. So thank you guys so much. New moon tonight, perfect timing to seed new creative cycle. Really good point, Rhonda. I'm so not in touch with the moon cycles, so thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Doc Bill. I so appreciate it. Bill, I should say. And Emily, thank you. It's my pleasure to do this work with you. Christina says, so much decluttering around here, physically and emotionally. Be honest about what needs to go. Exactly. Cindy, love this. All right. Thank you guys so much. I'm so glad you feel that way, Sonia. Thank you for being here. I'm just going to close the records of consciousness just to, in case anybody's a little ungrounded from it. I wanted to thank the masters, teachers, and loved ones for their love and compassion, the lords of the records for their point of view, and the Holy Spirit of light for all knowledge and healing. I ask that you return consciousness to its own little place where it lives. And I ask that you return me and everyone else here to our complete human wholeness now. The divine portal and the Akashic records of consciousness are now closed. Amen. The divine portal and the Akashic records of consciousness are now closed. Amen. The divine portal and the Akashic records of consciousness are now closed. Amen, amen, amen. All right, my friends, when you need to dive deeper and get some deeper insights or more clarity, please book your session at katierubin.com. Now is a great time to do it. The vibes are high. And bring your friends here to Katie Church next week. It's free. They can come anytime they want. Let's expand our viewership here. Let's bring more people into the fold. I love you guys. Oh, and of course, you should be listening to All the Answers podcast. I mean, if you care about yourself and you like fun, and if you care about consciousness and spirituality, I hope you'll listen. I hope we'll see you there. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.